Good Sunday morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee along with my colleague John North. I'm John Becker. We're pleased to have you with us for another edition of Inside Tennessee. We're focused on the 2nd Congressional District. Our guest this morning is the Democratic candidate, Jane George. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
I'm going to introduce our panel and then we'll get to the questions. Susan Richardson Williams is a Republican, also runs her own PR firm. Nice to have you.
Good morning, John.
Don Bosch is a Democrat, runs his own law firm.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Let's start, John, with the big picture and show our viewers what we're looking at in terms of the makeup of Tennessee's congressional districts. And we want you to focus in East Tennessee on the blue there. That is the 2nd Congressional District. And believe it or not, within that blue amoeba live almost 800,000 people. There are 9 congressional districts in the state of Tennessee. You see how they're broken up. Welcome to the way we draw congressional districts in this world. But the blue one is what we're focused on. And of course, the incumbent is Representative Tim Burchett, who is a Republican and has served a couple of terms now in that seat. And John North, you visited with his campaign because we invited Congressman Burchett on this broadcast.
That's right, we did. We started planning that several weeks ago. It's tradition here at Channel 10. If you all watch us, then you know we always like to have both candidates on, the Democrat and the Republican. We've done it before with Tim. We did it this time. His campaign spokesman said didn't really like the proposed format, which was Jane and Tim. So they were like, thanks, no, didn't do it. We had last Sunday Becky Duncan Massey and her opponent DeMonica Bryan, thanks to both of them. And next week we anticipate Gloria Johnson, Marsha Blackburn. Her opponent has not responded to our request to come on, but we've got Jane George this morning.
So let's start. Jane, why are you running?
Well, I'm a 6th generation East Tennessean, and I love this district. My family's been here for a long time, and I see a lot of things happening in Tennessee that I find to be discouraging, disappointing, worrisome, troublesome, and part of that has to do with the representation that we have. So I wanted to give voters an opportunity to make different choices and to have a different level of representation.
And let's talk about the biggest difference between you and your opponent in this race.
Oh, there are so many. I think that one of the things that I at least am observing in my opponent is a desire to really minimize federal government and through that minimizing a lot of the things that we really benefit from here in East Tennessee and across the nation. Some of those things are having a direct impact on us, things like FEMA funding. We're starting to see that it's a difficult challenge if you are going to restrict FEMA funding and then turn around and say there's not enough money to help people. These are the kinds of things that we are seeing in our representation now. We certainly have a different stance on health care and how that should show up. In 1991, I was very fortunate to go to London as a research scientist, and I was investigating the differences between a private and a public healthcare system. And you can do that in London because both exist. And there's no reason that we can't have that here. It's actually a fiscally smart idea to have both. And we know that it would reduce our expenditures our GDP expenditures, which right now it's very significant how much we're spending on healthcare. So we have very different ideas, very different approaches to how we want to manage the world of our constituents.
I want to ask one specific, and then John, feel free to weigh in. But we just saw this vote on the omnibus bill to keep the government funded. That Congressman Burchett voted no. He voted against that because he said it's too bloated. We don't have a good idea of where to spend money. And to be fair, he has voted against these back in the Trump administration as well. He's just not a fan of how much money the government is spending. You take a different view. What is that?
I do. I think that we can be a much better and more sustainable culture. I think a strong nation is one that's well fed, that's well housed, that's well educated, and certainly has access to hospital care and doctor care. And having that standardized across states, I think, is something that's incredibly valuable, and it really helps the entire nation. I think that that's a place where we have very different ideals. So obviously those investments, and I do see those as investments, he does not see that investment at the same level. So in essence, again, when we go back back to this concept of the role of the federal government in our nation, where that we are diametrically opposed, where he is going to see this as an inflation of spending, where I can see it as being a benefit, and for all of our citizens to actually to literally benefit on all those different levels, and he is not invested in that at the federal level for sure.
Jane, this is honestly kind of an obvious question. I went back and looked at sort of the historic voting record for this district through the many years. As you know, it is a conservative district.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, Jimmy Duncan's numbers when he was the Republican representative were even better than Tim Burchett's in terms of voting returns. So that being said, how do you as a Democrat convince more of those people to come over to your side?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think that you're seeing that a lot of people are in alignment across the state of Tennessee with some of the general things that we are advocating for as Democrats. Things like reasonable gun control, really having a good line for defining what is a weapon and what is something that we need to have in our homes. I'm an advocate of gun ownership. I certainly believe, as the majority of Tennesseans do, that there are some things that we could be doing to protect our citizens, our kids in schools, our families in parks. So I think that there's a resonance towards the middle. And I think that in a lot of ways I sit there. I was raised by Republicans. I'm from rural Tennessee. My family are rural Republicans. I have grandfathers that go all the way back to 1804 that are laying up in Thorn Grove. And so I understand the Republican ideas. I understand the fiscal responsibility. I understand the investments in the values, faith and family and freedom. We support those in this campaign. So we're not different in those ways. I think that perhaps how we would manifest those and how we legislate looks different.
We've got to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more of our conversation with Jane George. Again, she is challenging Congressman Tim Burchett for this seat in the 2nd Congressional District. Early voting starts on October 16th. We're back with more of our conversation right after this. In western North Carolina, we are seeing catastrophic flooding.
More than 1,000 missing persons reports.
You can hear the emergency helicopters overhead.
I've not seen anything like it.
The oil tanks are flipped over. We propane tanks floating by.
It just twisted my house like it was a beer can.
You can hear people screaming, help! And when I happened to look in the river, I saw people hanging out with trees.
We were lucky to eat something, because if there was no food and water, we would have been dead right now.
Continue with us and watch free now on the 10 Plus app.
Back on Inside Tennessee, talking about the upcoming election, John, and specifically the 2nd Congressional District. Susan?
Well, you mentioned health care, that you've been to London. I noticed on your website you mentioned universal health care, you'd like to see Medicaid expansion, et cetera, et cetera. How do we pay for that in this country?
Oh, I think that's such a good question, because there's a big myth out there that we can't afford it. And the truth is that right now our biggest expenditure out of our GDP is on health care.
Right.
And there have been study after study after study showing that a single payer system would actually reduce that spending. So it's actually fiscally smarter to have a single payer system. Now, for people that are concerned about, I want my doctor.
Yes,
or,
access to
healthcare.
Yes,
then I get that. So I really believe that you can, and we see it, you can have both. So having one does not mean that you can't have the other. So for those people who still have access, for those people who have a job where their health care is provided for them, people that make enough money that they can provide health care for themselves and their families, they can still have those choices, right? We are moving in Tennessee into more and more managed care. We're seeing that across the state. We are losing hospitals. We have the highest rural hospital loss per capita in the nation. In fact, right now, in 5 of the counties in our district, there's 7, and 5 of those are at or near a maternal desert. So a woman, a pregnant mother, is not within a 90-minute drive to a hospital or an obstetrician. So these are things that if we have better management in terms of making sure that not everything is privatized, it's not all for profit,
But do you really think the federal government can be a better manager of health care?
Well, they call it Medicare and Medicaid now.
I know what that is.
Yeah,
and it's not great. You're not on it yet.
I'm close, but that said, it is
not
there.
great.
And like Jane said, you have the option of having private insurance along with the governmental insurance.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I do think that we're capable of it. I think it required an investment. You know, it's building something new on a structure that exists, and we do have it for folks who are over 65. And I know that there are a lot of people that are very happy with their care. They love their doctors. They're seeing the same. They're going into the same hospitals as others, and they're getting the same care. So I don't doubt that it's something that we could absolutely manage in states that have implemented it, states where they have brought in Medicaid expansion. We're finding that patients are happy. They are getting access to care. Right now, I'm a functional medicine chiropractor, and right now I have a patient who came in recently who's been having some problems and literally had muscle atrophy as a consequence of these problems. It took him 6 weeks to get a scheduled MRI. He was in so much pain he couldn't sleep at night, and had been by the time I got to see him. So 6 weeks to get an MRI, waited another 3 weeks to get the results, then to meet with that doctor to then get treatment.
I would argue that getting the federal government involved would not cut that down, but we have a disagreement on that.
That's fine.
Well, what we know is without the federal government involved, there are far too many people that do not have access to health care.
That's right.
Something has to change.
That's absolutely true, and it's affecting our families, you know, and particularly marginalized folks in our country, and they are as much a part of this district as others, and we want to make sure that that representation is happening for them. We know that our veterans in the state of Tennessee are suffering because we have not accepted Medicaid expansion, and they don't have access. I have one of the folks that's working on our campaign is a disabled veteran who is fighting cancer, who was exposed to toxic chemicals when he was in the Navy, in the submarine. And so he is not able to get the care that he needs. He advocates for other veterans, and it's one of the reasons he's part of our campaign. We're already doing the job. We have people that are already reaching out to us saying, we don't have access to care. Can you help us? Because we're not getting any support from my opponent. So we're already doing the job with that. We have somebody in place that's helping them. Here's a list of people. Here's agencies. Here's who can advocate for you. These are problems when our veterans can't get access to health care based on an unproven statement that we can't afford to do it.
So Jane, let me switch up a little bit here. You mentioned that this district has 7 counties, and we are a diverse district.
Oh, yes.
We can talk about the gerrymandering that's gone on, frankly, with both parties over hundreds of years. I think Susan probably remembers the first time a Democrat was elected in this district. Wasn't it right after the Civil War?
Very funny. It was never.
Yeah, well,
it
been
was
a while.
never.
It was never.
Yeah, it was never.
That's right.
One.
But
she might live long enough.
She might. That is true. But it's a diverse district. Also, it's very rural. It's also got a very urban component.
Absolutely.
It's got a major university, farming, industry. How do you appeal to all this district? Everybody in Knoxville, you're a pretty well-known commodity. You're a public school graduate in the Knox County system.
That's
Bearden.
right.
So how do you reach out to those other counties that don't quite look like Knoxville? How are you resonating with those voters?
I love this question because really when you're working as a representative, you're going to your constituents and saying, what do you need? How can I help? What are the problems that you're confronting that we have the capacity to do something about? It doesn't mean that every person in my district has to have a problem with whether lands are being developed and there's no schools or roads out in a rural community. We don't need that problem to happen in Knoxville for me to be a good representative for that person. When it comes down to issues like health care, that's a universal issue. Right? So it's that diversity, when you talk about that, is really not true diversity. Everyone needs access to health care. That's a big one for me. If you want to talk about, and for some people, they talk about the values of East Tennessee being different in rural communities than they are in our urban centers. I don't think that's true. I think that we are very focused on and very caring neighbors. You know, I'm concerned about what's been happening over the last few years in terms of how we are treating the other based on the letter that's behind our name. You know, and I grew up in a Sunday school. My daddy was a Sunday school teacher. My parents were the directors of our youth group in school. And so the church was always part of my life too. And my family is rural. They're rural Republicans. So I learned very early as a child that what someone needs individually is probably irrelevant to whether someone else needs it specifically in another part of the district. We can do both, right? We can talk about agricultural development, we can talk about hospitals. What we know in terms of the connections, I'm going to give you a connection that I think you'll find fascinating. As doctors are leaving our rural communities, there's no hospitals for them to practice in. Some are very concerned about the laws that have happened in terms of being able to practice to their standard of care. And a consequence to that is not just those doctors you might think that are concerned about landing in jail, but some that are women who are concerned about how it would affect their health care. And then there are male doctors who are married to women they're concerned about their access. They have daughters concerned about access to health care on all these fronts. The consequence to that is now it's not just women of reproductive age who are struggling in these rural communities, but also women of non-reproductive age, because that gynecologist was also that obstetrician was also their gynecologist. So now they're not getting breast exams. They can't get cancer screenings. It's having an impact on them. That's going to impact us in 5 to 10 years when we're not attracting doctors here to go in to replace those physicians in our urban centers. So there's a lot of ways you can really connect our rural, suburban, and urban communities.
We've got to take another quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with more in a lightning round with John North right after this. Back on Inside Tennessee, talking football there at the break. John North, go away.
Some quick questions, Jane. Term limits, good thing or bad?
I think they're a good thing. I think they have to be established at a reasonable rate so somebody has time to get there, get to know the ropes, make a difference.
What's reasonable?
And then I think for House is 3 terms.
3 terms, 6 years.
6 years.
Joe Biden got out in July. He's the standard bearer. He was the guy that was supposed to be elected to be president again. He got out. Good thing or bad?
Oh, I think it's a good thing. Absolutely. Why? I think he's doing a great job. I'm happy that he's done what he's done. I think he's been a very successful president, and he'll go down in history as that. But I think that we needed this lift and change and shift, and I'm happy for it, and I think most Democrats are.
Last one. DEI hires, a good thing or bad?
I think that they're fine if you know what the meaning of DEI is, right? And I think it's incredibly important that you do. And all it says is if I have 2 candidates next to each other who have equal education, equal job, equal resume, all of those things, how do we make that decision to make our business, our corporation, our government look like America?
Is saying DEI now a dog whistle for racism?
Oh, I think it's being used that way. I don't think it's absolutely not the case for everyone. That's why I'm happy to say it's fine, but it is absolutely a dog whistle for racism.
Well, let's talk about another issue that I know you're supportive of, climate change.
Sure. Oh,
a
yes.
lot on that.
Yes.
We're probably seeing some of that as we speak.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks.
Yes.
How far would you go if you were in Congress? Would you mandate electric cars? Would you ban fracking? Would you ban coal? How far would you go if you are elected?
Well, I think we have to look at the big picture. We have to ask the experts. One of the realities of being in a campaign as opposed to being sitting in a seat is what information I have access to. What I can say is that it doesn't really matter what you believe in terms of how we got here. We're here, and we are not making strong enough changes to leave this nation, this planet, to our children and our grandchildren better than we came into it ourselves. So we have to make some changes. When I was in D.C. A couple of months ago, I met with the head of Southern Powers. They're a big power company in Atlanta, and he sat down to talk to me. And very Republican. He was talking about his buddy Dick Cheney, and but it was nice.
Who, by the way, is supporting.
Yes, who is supporting. That's right. Absolutely. Yes. And so when I sat down to talk to him, he said, we're on very different sides of the political spectrum. I said, of course, but we both live on the same planet. And I want to be educated by you because this is what you do every day when you go to work. You look at this analysis. I don't care what party you vote for. I want to learn what you know. And that's what I would do in terms of approaching climate changes that we might need to legislate.
So no absolutes.
Not at this stage of the game. You know, I don't have enough information to be able to make those kinds of calls, and I wouldn't pretend to. It would just be politicking, you know. And there's no reason to do that, to try to get votes, to just say, you know, well, I don't know yet. But I absolutely can tell you I'm committed to doing everything that we can to shift this in a different direction.
What's the best thing Congressman Burchett has accomplished during his time in office?
Oh, I don't know. I think he's a good constituent caretaker. I think he takes care of people when they come to him. I can tell you that personally, when my grandmother was diagnosed that she was at the end of life, and we were giving her a big party, and I called him when he was mayor, and I said, would you give my grandmother a proclamation? And he made that happen. And so as a constituent, I know that he really does focus on those kinds of things. And I think that's really important. But I got to tell you, what's happening at the level in D.C. that he's playing, those are not the big ones, right? It's great to have that. But we need to be making decisions in a different way if we really want to change the climate.
So you mentioned healthcare. What's the biggest issue facing Congressional District 2 in Tennessee?
Lack of physicians. You know, we are even running down in terms of our emergency rooms. You know, you can go down to an emergency room some nights and there are people sitting with IVs outside. There are people laying on the floor. You know, we have a real problem of understaffing. I had COVID and I had some cardiac stuff with it, and we didn't know it was COVID, and I ended up going to the hospital, and they couldn't get me into a room. When they did get me into a room, the whole ward was empty. There were literally no other patients in that ward, and the reason was because they didn't have the staffing to put me there.
I had a similar experience in the last several months.
You've got to be able to attract physicians. I did an interview with a woman in Chicago who just graduated from Johns Hopkins. Not graduated, she just finished her internship. She's now a pediatric specialty surgeon at Children's Hospital in New York City. And she said, listen, I want you to know that none of us in my level want to go and will practice in a state that has the bans that you have in your state. So these laws, which I consider to be draconian laws, are preventing those of us that aren't even directly affected by those laws are now being directly affected.
Only have time, 30 seconds, one question. Your message to Republicans who may fit in the Liz or Dick Cheney world and why they should vote for you.
Because I am reasonable. I'm here to stand up and hear what you have to say, what's important to you. I want to advocate for you. I want to do it in a way that is reasonable. You know, Alexander Hamilton said, we talk about our forefathers, he said that compromise was the key to a stable government. This extremism politics doesn't resonate with us. This current, and I will say extreme because I have a lot of friends and family that are Republicans. And so I'm seeing them say, this is not my father's GOP, not my mother's GOP. And I think it's really true. And I do have to say that I feel like my opponent has fallen into that extreme side. And there are so many Republicans that are reaching out to me saying, I just want to make sure that if you get this job and I vote for you, this is how you feel about this, or you, absolutely, let's talk about that. I want to hear what you have to say. It's important to me what you value.
Ms. George, we appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and happy Sunday. It's a beautiful day outside.
It's a beautiful day. We're back with our talk around right after this.
Continue with us and watch free now on the 10 Plus app.
Susan, tough to beat incumbent Tim Burchett. He hasn't lost a race.
He has not. He's served at every level, State House, State Senate, Mayor, Congress. I think Tim's values fit the district very well. Jane's very intelligent, obviously very well spoken. Her values are probably too progressive for this district at this point in time. I think Tim wins, but she's a good candidate for the Democrats.
Don, you'll be watching the percentages. What are you looking for?
Well, Tim's a different candidate and a different elected official now than what he was as mayor and even in the State House and Senate. He really has joined that hard right that I think is losing traction even in East Tennessee. It's not going to surprise me to see Tim drop down into the low 60s when, Jimmy Duncan won this district, at times by 79, 80 points, sometimes the highest percentage of any elected congressman in our country. Tim is not going to be there, and Tim is going to lose traction, I believe. And he's hurting himself. He's hurting himself on social media. He's hurting himself with policies. Jane George, very, very good candidate, going to do well.
Actually, his split has been 61% pretty consistently in his election. So the question becomes, is he upper 50s?
Yeah, I think it could definitely drop below 60. I actually thought Tim was a little higher than that, so I gave him credit where it's not due.
Unified message here on the hurricane victims and help for people hit by Helene and then our neighbors to the south.
Yeah, it's so sad. We have never seen anything like this. Shout outs to Dolly Parton, to Morgan Wallen, to all the folks that are helping, and to you all.
Yeah. We appreciate you watching on this Sunday. More of our coverage online at WBIR.com. We'll see you next week.